Does the screen show that I'm recording right now?
Yes.
Does it show? Okay, nice. Okay. Okay, we have a couple other people coming in. Okay, I think it's fine to get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our town hall. We're so excited that you're here and we have a lot to tell you about and a lot of things to do. So we're excited to get started. My name is Saho Lee. I'm a senior at ARPS and I'm also a co-founder and hub co-coordinator of the Amherst Sunrise Hub, which is co-hosting this town hall along with Defund413 Amherst. So this town hall is, as you probably already know, just going to be us talking about how much we care about our Amherst education and just advocating for the reallocation of funding for the currently enlarged Amherst Police Department budget and shifting that to the ARPS budget, which is currently facing some pretty big budget cuts. So if you can move to the next slide. Okay, so before we get into kind of the main part of this town hall, I just wanted to introduce Sunrise Amherst a little bit. So you may have heard of Sunrise Movement, which is a youth-led national organization dedicated to supporting the Green New Deal, and Sunrise is one of those local hubs. We were founded in June of 2019 with 4 ARHS members and 2 Amherst College members. Unfortunately, those two Amherst College members have graduated and the other 2 ARHS members have also graduated. So right now, the only co-founders left are me and Ali, who is also in this call. But luckily, we do have 10 members, all 18 and under, who are really dedicated to the work they do with Sunrise Amherst. And in the past, we've done other town halls, we've done watch parties, we've co-organized strikes and written a lot of letters to the newspapers. But I definitely think that this town hall is one of the most important or significant events we've organized, not just because of what's at stake, but just because of how closely the members work with each other. We had different groups working on different tasks, but we were always consistently communicating with each other. And despite everything being virtual, we grew a lot closer together, and that made us so much more effective and efficient as a team. So I'm really proud of all the progress we've made. So thank you to all those members, and if you want to wave your hand, that's also cool. But yeah, all the members' names are listed on the left of this slide. So just before a few final words, in case you're wondering why a local environmental group is doing things about the ARPS budget, Amherst Sunrise is mainly made up of students who really care about their education, and a lot of ARPS students are also in Amherst Sunrise. So this is a really important topic to us. And Sunrise Movement also does a lot of social justice work, and since Amherst Sunrise has been doing work in the defund movement, we thought it would be a good idea based on where our passions were to connect the two topics together, and that's something you'll be seeing a lot today. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Marisol.
Thank you, Saho. Hello, everyone. My name is Marisol. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm 14, and I'm one of the Defund the Police project leads at Amherst Sunrise. I just wanted to say also, Sarah, one of our amazing members, will be popping links in the chat for you all to see. And as well, we are hosting this town hall and working towards defunding the police because Sunrise works on an intersectional platform as well as racial equity as well as climate justice. So now I'll go into the plans for the ARPS budget cuts. So here are the proposed cuts you'll see on the slide. Overall, there's a $1 million amount of budget cuts to all Amherst schools. There's a $400,000 cut to elementary schools and overall $250,000 in reductions not due to lower enrollment or one-time funds such as one-time health insurance. These cuts includes arts such as performing and visual arts. The elementary school will have a decrease in arts integrated learning with their education cuts, and significant art class offerings from the middle and high schools are being cut. Special education cuts refer to ELL services, English as a second language, and services for those with special needs. The superintendent and school committee claims all funds being cut are due to lower enrollment, but $250,000 are being cut otherwise. And I'll go to the next slide. So why these cuts? In our society, arts education and funding, and those for students with special needs, are always, pretty much always, the first thing schools decide to cut when foregoing budget cuts. This may be because of the above entities don't have as many requirements of staff positions to fill under them by the state, and this provides for less innovation, creativity, and outlets for ARPS students and the school, and as well as less services and support for those who need it, and decreasing arts education value and disinteresting kids in school. Go to the next slide. And I'll pass it off to Amrita.
Hi, I'm Amrita. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm 15. Yeah, so as Marisol said, the departments that are at risk right now are the art department and the ELL and special services department. And as far as arts go, it's the visual arts programs, the dance programs, the theater programs that are at risk of being damaged and cut, and positions might be taken away. So yeah, that's really detrimental to our community. I think a lot of students really enjoy those classes and get a lot out of them. I know personally, arts are a big reason this year, at least, that I kept coming back to school, especially with such a hard year of learning this year. Having something fun where you really get to be listened to is something that I think kept a lot of students coming back, because it's a place where you get your voice heard and you get to be creative and express yourself. Um, but these arts classes aren't all about just having fun. They also set a lot of students up for a career. A lot of students come out of the high school and end up being graphic designers, or they go to Broadway, or they write a book or something. And they wouldn't be able to do that if they didn't have this art education in high school. And if they, yeah, a lot of students, I think, find out that art is something that they're really interested in and passionate about in high school, in elementary school, and middle school. And I think a lot of the artists today probably found that out in high school as well. And we would not have this rich culture of art in Amherst or in the United States if we didn't have arts classes in high school. Also, there's several studies that show that they improve students' performance in math, reading, and writing. So it would decrease our overall academic skills as a school to take away the art classes. And it also improves student self-esteem and confidence and critical thinking skills. So socially, art can make a big difference in how people feel and interact. And it also really just brings our community together, because we get to hear different perspectives of students through art and empathize with them. And we get these great performances, like the dance performances and the theater performances. And a lot of those wouldn't be able to happen anymore without these art programs. Yeah, so the next slide. Yeah, the other big place that things are being cut is the LL and the special services department, which obviously is just detrimental to cut this department. Like, a lot of students depend heavily on these programs, and taking them away really impairs their learning. Yeah, so the ELL and special services students need these programs, and without them, they may not do as well in school, and it will be harder for them to interact with other students socially, especially with the language barrier. Yeah, and I think it's really important that we don't cut these programs, especially right now when we have so many students that are depending on the ELL and special services programs. Yeah, and they also, aside from it really hurting the students that benefit from these programs, the special services teachers already have the low salaries. So cutting them even more is just awful. And they are a place in the school that has the most diversity. So cutting the positions would mean that our whole community would have less diversity, which, yeah. And I'll pass it off to Julian, I think.
Yes, hi there. So now we are doing a salary comparison between staff members at the Amherst Regional and Elementary Schools and staff members at the Amherst Police Department. Police Department spent $5,124,207 on 71 staff member wages. That's an average of $72,171.93 per staff member. An Amherst police officer's starting salary is $45,000, which is 6% higher than that of Amherst teachers and 144% higher than that of Amherst paraeducators. The Amherst Police Department has, next slide, please. Thank you. The Amherst Police Department has a wide range of staff. That ranges from your average police officer to to the chief, to a supervisor, or a janitor. The school district has paraeducators, teachers, all the way up to the school superintendent, and they have cooks and janitors and other people who help keep the school running. The average school district staff member for the region, which is the middle school and the high school, makes $56,000 a year, and the average staff member for the Amherst elementary schools, which is Crocker Farm, Fort River, and Wildwood, makes about $1,000 less than that at $55,000 per year. So as you can see, we've made a little chart with the elementary school and the regional school staff compared to the APD staff. You can see that the police department staff have significantly higher average salaries and have higher average starting salaries. I'd also point out that at this point, the average teacher needs a master's degree to be able to be hired in the state of Massachusetts. And police officers can get hired straight out of the military without any college education. So they are making much more in the police department, and they're working similar hours, and they have much less education starting their jobs. So here we can see the disparities between where our communities decide to put their money and where they decide to not put their money.
Yes. I'm Holland Silva. I am 16 years old. I use any pronouns. I'm a member of Sunrise Amherst. So we know the facts and statistics now about what these cuts are, what their impacts could be. And it's really important now to pay attention and listen to the direct consequences and people involved in the community's stories. So I turn it over now to a few wonderful guest speakers who are a part of the ARPS community and are in both staff and students to talk about how these services have benefited them and how these cuts could hurt our community and our schools.
So our first speaker, or we have 3 adult speakers, and our first adult speaker is Ms. Ashley Sayer, who is the ARHS ELL department head and a teacher at the high school.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, so it's an honor to be here with you all today. As Sayo said, I'm the ARHS ELL department head. I've also been an ELL teacher for most of my adult life. And I'm very passionate, obviously, about the profession itself, but also the district. So our program is critical to the emergent bilinguals in our district because not only are they getting access to the English language, but they're also learning about the American public school system. They get the opportunity to learn about the college application process. And for several of our students, a growing demographic of our students, when they come to school here, this is their first formal schooling experience they've had since they were maybe 9 or 10 years old, due to violence or various structural things going on in their past countries that didn't allow them to attend school regularly. So in addition, like I said, to teaching English, we're teaching so many other really important skills for the futures, whatever they might end up doing. So that's a big part of our program. As well, in Massachusetts, we have some of the highest numbers of immigrants in the Northeast. So Massachusetts Public Schools is continuously enrolling a growing number of emergent bilinguals every year. Our program is very important for them, as you said, for their integration into not only US schools, but also US culture. School is often the first place where you really start to get a sense of what the United States is about. the proposed budget cuts are primarily affecting our bilingual interpreter positions. So these just amazingly talented individuals, I cannot say enough about our interpreters, are those people who help our students in their non-ELL classes. So in their science classes, their math courses, and also like PE and health. Without them, our students wouldn't be able to access the same curriculum and the same academic standards that their native English speaking peers can. So those positions, while they seem small, are just so critically important for the success of the ELL population at our school. So I would implore everyone to think about what that would mean for some of our students, especially those who build really strong bonds with our interpreters. And I think I also want to say, so I am an Amherst High School graduate myself. I am proudly back in town and teaching as part of this school. I feel very proud of this town and I'm glad to be a part of it. I definitely feel that this is a wonderful place for students. I'm so glad to be the first school that a lot of our emergent bilinguals are experiencing. And I just want to ensure that they're getting the best opportunities and programs available to them. One quick story, because I know I'm almost out of time. So I've been teaching in the district now 5 years. When I started, I had a student in 8th grade. So that year I was in the high school and the middle school. She didn't speak much English. She needed a bilingual interpreter throughout most of the day. Well, now she's a senior. She's applied to several elite schools in the area, including Smith and Mount Holyoke. She has started horseback riding. She sings. She's part of a STEM club. All of these opportunities became available to here in Amherst through initially the ELL program and just also the contacts that she was able to make through her interpreters and through just the different contacts with the ELL department. So I know she's going to go on to great things. She's just one of so many stories of these amazing, brave, hardworking, resilient students. And I just want to maintain the tradition of a really strong department for them. So I'll end there, but thank you all so much for giving me the opportunity to share today.
Thank you, Ms. Sayre. Those words were really impactful. Our next speaker is Ms. Elizabeth Haygood, who's the ARHS PE and health teacher, a sports coach, and also the club activities manager.
I'm going to ask again, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So my name is Elizabeth Haygood. As you can see, I go by she, her, hers pronouns. I began coaching at Amherst Regional High School in 1981. I became a full-time teacher in 1998, and I will end my reign on June 30th of this year. So for all you seniors, I will be graduating with you. I have raised my 2 sons here. They are both graduates of Amherst Regional High School. They were not the most productive academically, but were very successful in athletics, which is one of the things that kept them engaged in our school. I also have a young son who is now a dad, who has a son. My grandson is in 7th grade and another in 6th grade, along with a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, and he went through our special education program. And if it wasn't for those special education teachers, he wouldn't be here. There are 3 adults in this call, Mr. Sadiq, Miss Sayre, and Miss Clark, who I do believe I was coaching when they were athletes at our school. But I want to talk to you about how I'm feeling about the budget cuts, and I have a few main focuses. One of the focuses has to do with movement and how the cuts are affecting movement and how movement affects children. Movement enhances the development of neural connections of the brain, which enhances the child's ability to learn, improves memory and retrieval, and enhances the learner's motivation and morale. Movement affects everything: circulation, digestion, metabolism, in your immune system. It regulates hormonal activity. It helps detoxify the body, and you can get plenty of rest when you have been moved. With that comes what we call the 3 domains of learning, which is learning the whole child. Cognitive, or the intellectual skills. Affective, a disposition of the appropriate emotions and response. And psychomotor, which is a physical actions, reflexes, and movements, and hand and eye coordination. And they help with the whole child. And with these cuts, we're getting away from the whole child. The whole child is an appropriate approach that values the human spirit, including physical, social, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual development. With these cuts, we seem to be getting away from that, and we're minimizing their opportunity to have success. One of the other things that I would like to approach is that this district, in lieu of all the things that are going on in this world, has a mandate this year that we are to take a look at our systemic racism and white supremacy as it prevails in our town and in our schools. We have gone through trainings over the summer. We have gone through trainings over the year. That's on our personal time. I went to a training over the summer. The school paid for the training, but it was during my personal time, as did about 40-something% of the entire teaching population. There's workshops with this gentleman named Joe Truss. We've also had some of our curriculum days developed to attack our systematic racism. We have a number of departments and teachers that have gone on to do even more trainings. And we've also had a number of teachers who have taught us things that they know. And we're all part of sub-working groups that include, my working group is to hire and retain staff of color. That's part of my working group. So we've had countless hours of trainings and workshops, but the budget cuts seem to go against, they're in contradiction to that mandate, because not only are we taken away from the whole child, but we're taken away from those who are most vulnerable, especially our Black and brown students who need those movement specialties in order to maintain themselves and be able to be successful in school. I am told that our town's budget is stable, but I'm not quite sure how that reflects on what's going on in our schools. We have new buildings and apartment complexes going up all over the place, new houses going up all over the place. So how is that a reduction in children? Where are all these kids going? Well, one of the things that's happening in our schools, based on the budget cuts that I've experienced since becoming a teacher, is that they're going to places that are enhancing the whole child. We used to have offerings that made children's self-esteem be so high that they wanted to come to school, and now they don't. We have had wood shop. We've had auto mechanics. I used to go in and get my oil changes. The students would go in, change my oil. I'd have to buy the parts, but it was part of their learning. When my car was broken, they would do a diagnostic on it. So when I took it to the mechanic for things that the kids couldn't do, I knew exactly what to tell the mechanic what was wrong with my car so that they didn't try to snow me, if you will. We had clothing and textiles. One of the proudest moments some of our kids had is when they made their prom dresses and their prom shirts and their prom tuxes and actually wore them to the prom. You talk about a self-esteem boost, there it is. We have cut foods. We have cut our daycare. We have cut culinary arts. And we are losing students, when we talk about enrollment, we are losing students to those places like Smith Folk and like Franklin Tech who are offering these things. And we, because they're our children, have to pay them for those children to go there, furthering getting away from our budget cuts when we could keep them here by offering some of these things. Our athletic programs have always been at the top of the ranks, but we do not put the time and the energy in to continue the skills that these kids need in order to be successful in athletics. And so when you have high skill in athletics, you tend to go other places. We have a number of students that have gone to play football or soccer at private schools. We have a lot of kids who go to Pope Francis for hockey because their hockey program is far above ours because we don't put the time and energy in. We made a track. We used to have a cinder track. It's now an all-weather track. That track has first meets were on it in 2000. It has supposed to have been resurfaced at least 2 times since we made it, and it never has. And now our track is not acceptable for training or to have meets. So now we have to have all our meets away because we haven't even upkept our track, which, by the way, a lot of people in our community also use. So when we're talking about budget cuts and how it affects, my department has gone from 13 from when I started in 1998, and when I leave, it will be 2. It used to be that phys ed was a requirement for 4 years, 12 weeks for 4 years. Now it is 1/4 for 40 days. And if you think about all the things that movement benefits you, that's a shame. And maybe that's one of the reasons why our children are suffering. I also want to mention what Ashley said. There have been in the past 15 to 20% of our teachers have actually been people who graduated from there, from ARHS. Both of my sons are paras. One is in the middle school and one is in the high school. And for my son to be a student who almost didn't make it, to see the value and have some pride in the teachers that helped him get through the things that he needed to get through, to come back to now be a para and help others, is what the school used to be able to provide for all of our students. I also want to mention one other thing that Ms. Sayer did not mention, is that when she talked about our interpreters don't get benefits. So they get paid on a salary. They get paid when they're working. They don't get paid when they're not. They don't get, when we have time off, they don't get paid. I get paid now, right? April vacation, I get a paycheck. The interpreters don't. So that's another knock on the people that are working the hardest for the students that need it the most. We are enriched by the fact that a number of people want their children to come to our school because we do the best in the state and sometimes in the country when it comes to our special education services. I know as a mother and as a teacher the benefit of that as it relates to my son. And these cuts are going to be a detriment to some of the most vulnerable people, including our low income and our Black and brown students. I thank you for your time. I appreciate you asking me to speak. I love ARHS. I would not have been here for some close to 40 years if I didn't, but the cuts they rip my core out every single time we have to make one.
Thank you, Ms. Haygood. Just before I introduce our final adult speaker, I just wanted to put in a quick comment. So diversity, I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room thinks that diversity is incredibly important. And I was fortunately able to be one of the members of the ARPS District Strategic Planning Committee for the years, I think, 2019 to 2023. Which is basically where we set a list of objectives for the district to try to reach by the end of the timeline. And one of the main and most important objectives was increasing diversity so that the students can see themselves in the teachers and that they have other people to connect with within the student body. And so just hearing about these budget cuts and knowing like that it's going to end up targeting a lot of the valuable diversity in the school community is really disheartening. And as a student who came into the high school wanting to take woodshop and foods, who ended up watching those get cut, I can definitely say that the disappointment is huge. So those are just a few of the words I wanted to say. So our final speaker, or our final adult speaker, is Mr. Talib Sadiq, who is the high school principal.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. And first, I'd like to say I really appreciate and respect all the work that Amherst Sunrise and other youth-led organizations are doing around environmental and social justice. It really gives me a lot of hope for the future. Sometimes the way things are, it's hard to find hope, but organizations and young folks like y'all definitely help to inspire me. Excuse me. So in terms of budget cuts, it's always a sad thing. I started my career back in 2006 at the middle school as a guidance counselor. Back then, there were 6 languages that students in middle and high school could take. Ms. Haygood and Ms. Sayre have highlighted a lot of the other programs and classes that have been cut over the years. I've always wondered why in a town that's presumed to be so affluent like Amherst is, with a flagship university and a private college with over $1 billion of endowment, why year after year there's continual cuts to the local school budget. I do think that locally, statewide, and federally, the governments really do need to reorganize how they spend taxpayers' money, and I think public education, no doubt, needs to be a higher priority. One of the programs that I think could help Amherst in particular is one that Boston and other cities and towns are using, called a pilot program. They have universities and colleges in their areas, so they have a payment in lieu of taxes. I think if we could implement something like that in Amherst, there wouldn't be a need for budget cuts year after year after year after year. It's so important to have we still do have a lot of offerings and different extracurricular activities and classes and electives that students can take, but again, we've lost so many, and each one we lose a significant number of students. It's harder. Education, the way it is now, the way we continue to teach folks, it works for some, but not for all. And the more ways we can allow students to express their intelligence and their creativities and connect them to school, the better we serve all of our students. Again, we lose when we have to make cuts instead of hiring new folks. As Saho expressed, there's less of a chance for us to diversify our adult population. When we have to make cuts instead of adds with classes, there's less chance for us to hook in other folks who may really benefit from a culinary arts program that may help to inspire them to do their algebra more. When I was a student in Amherst High, I did my homework because I wanted to play sports. There's been many cuts to sports programs. We used to have a wrestling team and other sports that are no longer at Amherst. And as Ms. Haygood mentioned earlier, we lose students because, unfortunately, we can't invest resources into sports when we have to cut academics and other classes as well. So I think there's a variety of ways that we can help to eliminate budget cuts year after year. And I do think that figuring out better ways to spend taxpayer money has to be at the top of the list. We're not like Hadley, who has Target and Walmart and all those other stores, but we do have UMass and Amherst College to help offset a lot of those costs. So I'm really hoping that through the efforts of Amherst Sunrise and other youth organizations with the support of the adults, that we can really push forward ways to, again, figure out better ways to spend the taxpayers' money. Keep my comments brief. And again, thank you for having me here. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Sadiq. We can't emphasize enough how important the adults are to our school and our education. So we're so glad we're able to get a couple of speakers to come. But of course, just as important as the people giving the education are the people receiving the education. So we have 2 student speakers today. Our first one is Leah Newberger, who is a sophomore at ARHS, and she's also a member of the Amherst Cultural Council.
Hi, my name's Leah. I use she, her pronouns. And before I started, I just wanted to say, as I was hearing other people talk, one thing I became really passionate about this year is accessibility to the arts and sort of just accessibility to education. And that's why I think continuing to fund the ELL and special services at the Amherst just benefits a lot of underserved communities that really need that help. So I wanted to say, throughout the pandemic, I think the one thing that's been made abundantly clear is the importance of teachers, both within our country and within our town. I think for a really long time, we just knew teachers and schools would be there to take care of kids because they always are. But after COVID, we realized just how much teachers and schools do every single day and how hard teaching is and how it really is the backbone of how this town can function. I really hope that after COVID, this becomes kind of like a jumping off point to re-examine how we think about teachers and how we can continue to support the school districts further. To start with the elementary schools, right now, they're going back in person, but the students, the younger students who don't have phones or ways to contact their friends other than their parents throughout quarantine have been left feeling so isolated and scared. I think art has proved countless times the importance of connecting with people and how kids who might not even be able to write yet, how they can communicate and process their feelings. I think art classes, especially as these elementary students have lost so much this year, are extremely important to fund in elementary schools because these students are still mourning the loss of their school and a lot of their social life. And it's one of the highlights of their day. And it would be really sad to take that away from kids who are really using it as a way to understand the world better. When I went to middle school, I think the drama program there had already been significantly cut. It used to be, the classroom was moved and we don't have a yearly play. We still found a lot of ways to perform on top of platforms and using just like cloths as backdrops. But I'm just so scared that if there's more cuts to the arts district at the middle school, we could lose what was really the highlights and the best parts of my middle school looking back. These programs are part of like the most essential memories I have of the middle school. And I think that's important. And I want other people and students to experience that as well. Another highlight of my day was visual art. And I think that art classrooms become safe spaces for so many students who might feel overwhelmed and not really fitting in other classrooms or work styles. They create places where everyone's work is valued and people can make things that they're really proud of. And like Miss Hagen was saying, having kids' self-esteem, especially in middle school, building that is so important. I was really sad to hear that I think one of the visual art teachers was recently let go from the middle school because I just remembered as soon as I heard that, I really thought back to that class and how much it meant to me and that specific teacher who really meant a lot to me. And I think in middle school, you're sort of going to a system where there's so many different teachers and it's like hard to remember, but I really was immediately taken back and I remembered a lot of what I had from that class, which I think shows that it really is important and a huge part of my education. Finally, at the high school, there is a super like rich culture of performing and visual arts that really brings the entire student body together. Throughout the pandemic, we're currently finding ways to do plays and musicals, which I think shows that the students deeply love and care about the performing arts and fight to be able to do it even throughout a pandemic. I think the places where so many students are happiest and proudest is during these performing art and during plays. And especially when I think about the pandemic and I think about how much has been cut from all these students' lives and both like educational lives and social lives. These, when you strip it down, when I think about my freshman year, and when I really strip it down, what I think about the most is the musical. And what I think about most is these arts things, because you have to really learn to hold on to what is important to you and what mattered to you. And I think that this matters to a lot of students. And I think it needs to continue to be funded. Lastly, I'm a dancer, and I danced at both the high school and the middle school with the dance and movement program. I heard that the dance teacher position may not be replaced after she recently retired. And I would be so saddened if that happened, especially because at the middle school, the dance program, you can opt into that instead of PE. So depending on the student, there's a lot of students that take dance who might not have otherwise. So a lot of students become introduced to dance and fall in love. This dance program, I think, was one of the only places to teach bomba to students, and had this, just the whole room, if you've ever been there, it's covered in pictures and lights, and it became a safe space for learning and creativity for so many students. And to see this taken away would make me so sad, because it's one of the unique things I do value about the high school a lot, is that we have a great dance program. Overall, we need to invest in our teachers, our students, and the arts. Yeah. We need to compensate teachers, and especially ELL teachers, for the tireless work they do every day, especially throughout a pandemic. And we need to provide students who have already been so hurt emotionally, and like their education has already been so different this year. We need to continue to fund the things that students care about and that matter to them, and that also build artists, because these programs, especially the visual arts program at the high school, is a great program, and students can go on to become artists, or go to dance colleges, or become musicians. So I think that's also important. And finally, we just need to protect the arts district, which is I think the most important central part of the school. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leah, for talking as a student at the high school and the middle school. Our final student speaker is Rafi Ash, who is a junior at the high school, and he's also co-chair of the high school YDSA, which is the Young Democratic Socialist of the high school.
Hello, my name is Rafi. I use he, him pronouns. As Saho said, I'm the co-chair of the YDSA at Amherst Regional High School, and I'm also one of 2 assistant tech directors in the Amherst Theater Company. I'm a junior. And the proposed budget cuts would do unnecessary and disgraceful harm to students. And the arts and special education are always cut first, because our society undervalues these things because they don't fit into capitalism, because they don't generate the same profit that other subjects do, because these subjects, the arts make us better humans, but they don't make us better workers. And emphasizing the arts means that we look at students as people instead of just as like a future producer, that it emphasizes like individuality and humanity. And the more that we hack away at their budget, the more it erodes the value of our education. I've done theater tech since my first year at the high school. The theater company is an integral part of what makes ALHS a great school, in my opinion. It has fueled my creativity. It allows me to find a community. It allowed me to make giant, large-scale artistic projects in a group in a way that cannot be facilitated without adequate funding. And when art funding does not come from schools, it comes from home. And it means that students whose families can afford private lessons and materials can continue to do art. But a class barrier prevents access for students who can't afford it. It makes art inaccessible to poor and marginalized students. And what makes art at a public school great is that it's public, it's free to all, and it's completely accessible. And investing in the arts is investing in all students' creativity, and cutting the arts is cutting those students down. And when budget cuts target the arts, they disproportionately harm the students who are already the most disadvantaged. Beyond all the reasons why we shouldn't do a budget cut because it's wrong, no budget cut is needed. Like, the regional school district will receive $1.6 million from a Biden stimulus, which is more than enough to fill the gap, but the budget has completely ignored that this stimulus is coming in and is instead making these cuts. But if these funds are coming, why have the committee already decided to call for austerity? And that makes that every cut program and teacher is a direct choice and not a necessity. It's a decision to attack the arts. It's not a necessity. It's a decision to lay off teachers and not replace retiring ones. And it's a decision to cut funding for special education and the electives that make our education more human and more engaging. And we must say that these cuts are completely unacceptable decisions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our speakers for coming and sharing your perspectives and experiences and thoughts about these budget cuts. We are so grateful to have you and are definitely glad to have your perspectives. It's very valuable to us. I will now turn over to any questions that people have, quick questions, clarifying questions about things that have been presented. You can raise your hand or put it in the chat. Just anything you need to ask about our facts or statistics or otherwise.
We'll probably have like a longer question session at the end for those of you who might have more questions just because of time issues. So yeah, that's just a heads up.
Yes. Okay. If no one has any quick questions, I think it's safe to move forward.
Okay, so we've all heard about the ARPS side of this issue, and just to connect it to the defund part that Amherst Sunrise and Defund are working together on, I'd like to introduce Allegra Clark, a member of the Defund413 Amherst movement, to give a presentation on what defund is.
So again, my name is Allegra Clark. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a 2003 graduate of Amherst Regional High School. So although I'm here with Defund, I deeply care about the high school, and obviously from all the speakers that we've heard and the youth that put this presentation together, they are doing great things to support the youth and should not be defunded so that police can continue to have an inflated budget. So Defund Amherst started after George Floyd's murder last year, and it started as an attempt to build racial equity and break down the systems that perpetuate white supremacy, such as police and other areas of the legal system. Our call has been to move funding from Amherst Police Department to community services that actually support public safety. And the hope is to center the needs of Black, Indigenous, and people of color and directly affected individuals that may be suffering with mental health or houselessness, so that those communities are the most supported in this process of restructuring. In true abolitionist spirit, we're also working to create the community we want to see. So in addition to advocating for budget reallocation, we've put on community events like the People's Picnic last summer and a recent Know Your Rights and Active Bystander training. We did bring our demands to Town Council last year, and among those were a $2.6 million cut to the police department in order to fund other areas in the budget. That was not taken up. The Town Council did freeze 2 positions from the police department and created the Community Safety Working Group to look at different possibilities for alternatives to policing in the town, as well as possible police reform movements. You can go to the next slide, please. So the Community Safety Working Group is made primarily of people of color in town, and they have been studying what's been going on both in Amherst and in other areas of the country to see what we could do differently. I'll note 93% of calls to Amherst Police Department are nonviolent. So they had proposed a few things, and this is still coming up, but for alternative mental health first responders, a youth empowerment center, a multicultural center, different ways of funding affordable housing and rental assistance, and a town office of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you can go to the next slide, please. So defunding the police and refunding education, why do these two things go hand in hand? Right now, during COVID, the 911 calls have dropped in half, and the need for social services has increased in some places by 4 times as much. And from the Amherst Survival Center, they've seen more people needing food and more food insecurity in this time. Also, with the school system, we've heard from parents during this whole reopening debate that student mental health is what is driving their need for reopening the schools, yet here we are talking about cutting supportive services to students. There's been an increase in needs from the 17-18 school year to now, and although the district is stating they want to prioritize social emotional wellness and racial equity initiatives, they are proposing cutting services that would address the most disadvantaged people in the district. There's also research from Arizona State University that educational inequalities in terms of funding for STEM programming, extracurricular and arts activities, technology activities, and counseling, when those things are underfunded, that can lead to potential involvement in the legal system. So if we're not funding schools and education, we're possibly setting our kids up for failure and for increased involvement with the legal system. And there is also research from the public health field that says that the harms associated with police exposure can begin in utero. So if a mother is pregnant and living in a neighborhood where there are high levels of policing, that can increase the risk for preterm birth, and then the ongoing effects are intergenerational, span the life course, and that's whether it's direct or indirect witnessing of police surveillance, brutality, or violence. So there are consequences from exposure to policing that can be linked to the educational outcomes in Black and Latino students who live in proximity to over-policing. That is another reason that we should fund schools instead of police. And finally, funding mental health and education with housing, employment, and other recreational programs supports communities and increases safety. Police don't provide those functions, nor should they. There's evidence that better resourced communities are safer, not more policed communities. You can go on to the next slide. So I did pull together some statements that had been given to the Community Safety Working Group's public forum regarding the impact of police in the community. And these are all taken from young Black males. So the first is a former Amherst Regional High School student shared an experience on New Year's Eve. He said he was leaving a party around midnight, walked past the South Amherst campus, and a police car pulled up. The officer jumped out of the car and ran towards the student with his hand on his gun, told the student to put his hands up, and then handcuffed him. He told the student he was going to be detained, but did not say why. When the student asked why he was being detained, the officer responded, "If you cooperate, I'll tell you why." The officer proceeded to search him and kept demanding, "Where's your gun?" The officer said he was looking for a Black male in a red jacket. The student in question was wearing a maroon jacket. More police arrived, a crowd was gathering. The student started speaking to the crowd, sharing his personal information as a self-defense strategy, and said, "Please tell someone what's going on here." The police said if he kept talking, he would be arrested for disorderly conduct. And then they put him in the police car, and a white friend did arrive and vouched for him, and the police apologized for the inconvenience and let him go. Another incident was presented by a former school committee member, that there were a number of Black males who were students hanging out in front of the fire station. A police officer then questioned them about shoplifting that had been reported at the neighboring CVS, took the boys into the CVS to be identified by employees, and they felt that they had no choice but to submit to the process, and it was traumatizing for them. Another incident was a senior at Amherst Regional High School sharing about her friends who were Black males being pulled over by the police, and the terror they felt, especially in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder. And finally, a former staff member at the ABC House shared that one of the 14-year-old students was trying to get home. When he tried to board the bus, there was an issue of him not having identification. Instead of calling the ABC House, they did call the police. And instead of checking in with his local guardians, the police proceeded to harass the child and tried to bait him into a physical confrontation. So to say that police brutality and racial profiling isn't happening in Amherst would be incorrect. This is a local issue, and there is going to be an upcoming budget process. So hopefully we can advocate for reallocating funds from the police department to community services, including education.
Thank you, Allegra. So next is what needs to happen next on this issue. So what does the public need to do next? While this town hall is important for delivering important information and bringing together a community of concerned community members, the action steps that happen afterwards are the most important. Shown is the timeline for the budget. That is May 1st, the budget from the school committee is due to the council. May 3rd, there's a public comment and presentation of the budget and a community safety working group's findings. May 13th, the finance committee reviews the community safety aspect of the budget, and May 17th is a budget town council meeting with public comment. June 1st is council discusses the budget recommendations, and June 3rd, the finance committee votes on the budget. And June 21st, the council votes on the budget. In addition, as well as this, to please get the word out, I'll go back to what happens next. We need to pressure the school committee, so we're going to send out an after action, which is our email bank with instructions on how to do so. This will tell school committee that they should not cut the ARPS budget and that they should repropose a new budget without these 1 million budget cuts. As well, pressure your town councilor. I know we have some amazing town councilors on this call, and this would be using our email bank to tell your district councilor and your at-large councilors that they should not cut ARPS budget and recommend for the town manager to cut the Amherst Police Department instead. And also when you are asking your town manager, Paul Bockelman, you will ask him to instead cut and reallocate funds from the Amherst Police Department in the budget proposal instead of cutting from the Amherst schools. As well, attend town council meetings with public comment. We'll continuously send out some emails about that. You should see it. And as well, we have a petition that Saho will present on.
Okay, we're nearing the end of our town hall, so thank you again everyone for coming. So of course this town hall is super important in getting support from our community members, but of course we all know that the most important parts are the actions following this up. So Amherst Sunrise has been organizing a petition, and we've gotten the forms and everything, so we'll just fill out what our asks are, and we'll be publicizing it. So if you'd like to help us, you can. But we need volunteers for filling out our petition, where we're asking the town council, the school committee, and the town manager to shift some of our funding from for the Amherst Police Department to the ARPS schools. And of course, this is categorized in the free petition category, and in order to get a hearing from the town council, we need at least 150 signatures from registered voters. So we've decided to organize an event happening next Saturday, May 1st at 12 p.m., where we're going to gather in front of the town hall steps with copies of our petition. And since I think the farmers market happens on Saturdays, that's kind of a good place for us to kind of walk around and ask people to sign our petition. And since we will be posting our petition PDF online for everyone to see, you can also, go individually to your neighbors and ask them to fill it out, and we'll have information and instructions about how to return the petition to Amherst Sunrise so that we can hopefully turn in all our signatures by Friday, May 7th. Since the period that the finance committee and town council makes recommendations to the town manager about any changes in the school budget is between May 1st and June 1st. So we're aiming to get this petition in as soon as possible so we have the greatest chances of making an impact. And of course, that's also where the public comment and the email banks come in, because we just need to keep on showing to our town leadership and our school district leadership how much we care about our education and what we think of the Amherst Police Department and just our thoughts. So this is kind of our main action item, and we'll definitely be emailing it out through our newsletter and through our Instagram and social media, and we'll email it to everyone who registered for this event. So just be on the lookout for that. So that's, I think, a description of our petition.
Yeah, this is the last thing that I have. We issued a letter to the Daily Hampshire Gazette on requesting that they cut from the Amherst Police Department budget instead of the Amherst schools. That was published on April 22nd, this Thursday. And among the people who signed on to that was Defund413 Amherst, Amherst Sunrise Movement, District 5 Councilor Darcy Dumont, who was on this call, District 1 Councilor Sarah Schwartz, and Amherst High student Leah Newberger, who spoke. The letter will be dropped into the chat by Sarah. If you would like to read it, please get the word out about it. We're trying our best to get as much public pressure on this as possible. And I believe there was a question on the chat. So the 250,000 that are being cut from is from the arts education, so performing, visual arts, as we said at the start of this presentation, and special needs services, English as a second language services, and interpreters. I hope that answers your question, Shalini.
Yeah, and adding on to that, personally at least, I think that those cuts that aren't having to do with enrollment are definitely going to affect students. I know that the arts and the ELL programs and special services programs make a really big impact, as we've talked about already, and they will be cut regardless of the enrollment. And so, yeah, it's going to impact us.
I'd also add that the letter that was published today, the letter that was published in the Amherst Bulletin was also published today in the Amherst Indie.
Just a final word about kind of the ARPS district. So the ARPS district does seem to pride itself and value a lot of the opportunities it can give students that go beyond just a core curriculum of science, math, English, and social studies. So like Mr. Sadiq and Ms. Haygood said, those electives and kind of the flexible schedule that the school allows is what makes the AHS schools or the ARP schools so appealing to students, not just in Amherst, but the surrounding towns. So I just wanted to reiterate that point, just to kind of get it in people's minds. So I'm sure you already know just how important it is for students to have different opportunities and different paths to choose. And that's why it's so important that we're doing this and trying to, keep our school budget as intact as possible. So are there any questions before we kind of wrap up this town hall?
I know people have also been asking questions in the chat that I've been answering. So if people also do that, to answer Darcy Dumont's question publicly, we are still researching the legality of whether we can have people under the age of 18 to sign on to the petition. Saho might have more to speak on this. So I'll pass it off to you, Saho.
So based on my communication with the Amherst town clerk, it seems like registered voters are the only signatures that will actually be counted in the 150 signatures needed to get a hearing from the town council. I still think while we're going to try to hit that 150 adult kind of need, I think that we are still going to try to get signatures from students just to show that there is a lot of student support for this issue. Since they're one of the most important parts of this ARPS budget town hall.
I think that's very wise. I think that if you can get signatures from students on separate pages and attach those signatures to the ones that are legal, just to have them have a see as to what's really going on and how the students are speaking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, are there any other questions?
Yeah, as well, I'd like to say, please keep an eye out on your email for any petitions, and I really hope to see you all next weekend to work on getting signatures in Amherst downtown. And as well, please use our email bank. Public pressure is the best thing because all of our counselors, school committee members, they represent our constituents, they represent us. So our voices are the most important in this matter.
With that being said, I think we are at the end of our town hall unless there are any final questions. So if you just, yeah. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this town hall. Amherst Sunrise and Defund413 are so excited that you all joined us. And we're definitely going to keep up the post-town hall actions to make the biggest impact possible. So hopefully we can get some of our awesome courses and teachers and get some more and keep our amazing teachers and staff. So yeah, thank you again for coming, and we hope you join us at our following action next week and you do some of the email banks and public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, and some of us will stay behind if you have any lasting questions that you don't want to answer with everyone.
If Amherst Sunrise people could also stay behind, that would be great. Yeah, this meeting is recorded, so we'll also be posting it too. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording. Well, thank you to all the speakers.